Antithesis. Chapter 1. It had been a lazy 2 weeks off. No more inky fingers from grading a seemingly endless barrage of student homework and tests. He no longer had to be in the office by 9 a.m., only to be hounded by an odd mix of apathetic, clueless, and overeager students. They came to him with boundless questions, not on light, photography, and refraction, as the course material would suggest, but with personal theories on how light and time travel might intertwine and other such gobbledygook. The tedium of it all had made Dr. Kenneth Shiro Hikari cringe in the months leading up to his long-awaited 6-month sabbatical. Alyssa, his faithful and hard-working wife and friend of nearly 20 years, was folding laundry and tacking some of the airier garments on the clothesline in the side yard. It was moments like this that made Ken Shiro Hikari truly blessed to be alive. He had no worries, no responsibilities, and the weight of his crushing love for Alyssa nearly brought him to tears. But only nearly. There were chores for him to attend to this morning. Despite the warmth of the early April morning and the beckoning breeze, Ken put on some dark bootcut jeans and his trusty ring work boots. A t-shirt with a dark blue-green button-down flannel seemed like a suitable match for a day full of feeding livestock and gardening and maybe a trip into town for food. By livestock, he thought, while absent-mindedly brushing his teeth, it was more like a ragtag group of chickens and an ornery goat. The chickens were useful. They produced eggs, but the goat was different. The goat was Shiro's nemesis. It loved to butt into him and literally tackle him to the ground. It seemed to delight in surprising Shiro just about any time his guard was down. That was bad enough, but the worst thing about this goat is that it liked eating flowers. And Alyssa loved planting a wide array of native and exotic bulbs, vines, and flowers of all sorts. Alyssa's prized family rosebush was always grazed from 4 feet down each spring and summer. They had both grown to expect it of Flowers, the yard goat. The idea had come to them back in the early 20-teens, when sustainable living was all the rage among Ken and Alyssa's more hippie-ish friends, and they bought into the yard goat phenomenon as well. Flowers existed for one job, to mow the lawn. Instead, he chewed on every bitter weed and flower in a quarter-mile radius, harassed the chickens, and was generally just a lovable nuisance. Stupid goat, Shiro thought, as he opened the front door with a loud squeak, clopped onto the wooden and dewy boards of his front porch, and hopped the rest of the 3 foot down to the ground next to a couple of metal trash canisters you'd see in old photos of a city like New York. Inside both trash cans were the appropriate feed for Ken and Alyssa's animals. He put some grain into a wooden box for the eager goat and went to tend the chickens. He opened the door to their coop, allowing the flock of about a dozen hens and 2 roosters to roam the yard. He decided he would gather the eggs this evening, so for now, he could just spread some scratch and layer feed on the ground near the coop. His thoughts turned towards his 3 dogs. A few short yips, followed by a deep and long howl, alerted Shiro that his 3 dogs must be on the trail of some rodent or another. His dogs were all part Welsh Corgi, Collie, and Kelpie. The big, muscular breed of the Kelpie lended a stocky German Shepherd look to the largest of the boys, Scholar, and the Collie really shone through in his brother, Shiner. Shiner was named immediately by Alyssa as a puppy due to his one white eye. He also sported a white vest on an otherwise all black and tan, sleek coat of long dog fur. All 3 dogs, their mother, Vidalia, included, had white socks and a bright white tip on their tails. She was a black and white Corgi-Collie mix. They were each perfectly suited to running the hills, brush, and thick forests of the Georgia hills, except for Vidalia. Her squat little legs could only carry her along so fast, and she always lagged behind, yipping and barking all the while. It was going to be a fine day indeed. After feeding the animals and inspecting the seedlings he had in a miniature greenhouse near the chicken coop, Shiro made the decision that next week or so, the peppers, squash, melons, okra, and zucchini would need to be transplanted to the small plot he and Alyssa kept, tilled up in the side yard. He would soon till his hay and triple 13 fertilizer into the 20-foot by 30-foot garden plot. There was a large seashell-shaped contraption, crisscrossed with neon green paracord, for the pea vines and morning glories to cling to this spring. Shiro ate a quick breakfast of oatmeal with extra cinnamon, milk, and butter, along with some homemade raspberry jam for some pizzazz. Breakfast of this champion, Ken thought. There was no doubt Ken Shiro Hikari was a champion. He had at least a dozen #1 finishes in national competitions in karate. His trophies were, many of them, nearly as tall as his shoulders. Above the karate and photography trophies was his family heirloom, an ancient suit of samurai armor and a black and tan pommeled katana with gold inlay and details. He had inherited the family heirloom on a fated trip to Japan in his junior year. He was a third-year student at that time, but still felt lost when speaking to the more traditional or older citizens of Kyoto. It was there that a middle-aged calligrapher told him of his family's tragic demise during the atomic bombing of Nagasaki. Shiro's very own great-grandmother had been rushed to America in the name of cultural exchange, but in reality it was a bid to save the most cherished and fortuitous of the Hikari clan. She was sent to a distant relative's home in San Francisco. The rest of her family was either incinerated in the initial blast of the horrendous bomb or had likely succumbed to radiation poisoning. His great-grandmother had obviously been very fertile and prolific in life because his family in America was numerous and wide-ranging. His father is a Hikari and 3/4 Japanese himself, and his mother a gentle Southern soul who still lives in Baton Rouge. Altogether, that made Shiro a mostly white imitation of his pure-blooded relatives. In fact, he thought of himself more as a white man than an Asian American man. His high cheekbones gave the impression he had some Native American in his ancestry, and rarely did an acquaintance ask about his Asian blood. That was all history to him anyway, and besides, anyone would pause to admire the handsome suit of armor and the dark and meticulously crafted katana. He thought it was actual shark skin used for the pommel. He wasn't sure, though. Alyssa called for him from the sunroom, a blue water can in her hands. "Dear, did you call Dave back about the quote for the extension?" "No, sorry," Ken said. "You said you'd call him last week. Why don't you hop to it and have him come out for an estimate?" When she said it that way, Ken had no choice but to oblige. Okay. At least let me wait until after lunch so he'll be in a good mood. Sound good?" "Uh-huh. Whatever you say. You know I have his phone number, too." "Ah, come on now. You can't just take the home renovation out from under my nose. You let the guys stick to our man things, and you worry with all these plants and animals and term papers." Shiro continued, "I just don't see how you have time to lounge around here in the morning, teach all 3 of your classes between 2 and 6, come back grade papers, and make a lesson plan, all just to wake up and do it again the next day." "I happen to really like my routine. It suits me just fine," Alyssa countered. "I never said it doesn't suit you, just that it wears even me out," he said. "Well, it's getting later, and I really must be getting a bath before heading to campus." "You don't want to join me for a bath, do you?" Alyssa arched an eyebrow expectantly. "No? Well, that really is too bad. It wouldn't kill you to unlace those damn boots and take a spa day anyway. You're way too tough on yourself." Shiro had just begun relaxing in the rocking chair on the front porch and enjoying the birdsong and the beating of a couple of hummingbirds weaning from the feeder hanging on the edge of the porch. That's when he received the call. 10:38 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Lieutenant Colonel James Betts had just gotten his unorthodox request approved by the Brigadier General Monroe. An AWOL female communications specialist had piled her equipment and everything with a GPS tracker on it in neat little pile at the edge of the demilitarized zone last week, and walked off alone holding a damn katana. The Army had heard absolutely nothing about her ever since. They suspect the local militia and the local populace are covering for her. She'd gone in the last time as a translator, widely spreading information and propaganda to help assuage fears in the region of an imminent destabilization and a probable societal collapse. Could it be that she became so empathetic to their cause that she just defected and began to live as they do. Lieutenant Colonel Betts thought, that doesn't excuse her deserting her post, and a strict military court-martial was in her near future. The stinging question was just how to find her. That's where intelligence delivered a left hook and came up with some professor of light and physics at Georgia Tech. Apparently, he had been her drill instructor in their high school J.R.O.T.C. battalion. They had gone to school together in some podunk town near to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He went on to become a successful physics professor, and she is a decorated war hero. Staff Sergeant Angela Kiba Schmidt had served 3 successful tours of combat as a radio communications specialist and sniper. She could shoot the whiskers off a bull gnat at 100 yards. She was seriously one of the best the Army had with practically any rifle. She had come in this last time to do light duty as a translator and propagandist. At a time when most soldiers would be thinking longingly of loved ones, family members, and old friends, this woman just produced an authentic black carbon steel katana, left all of her belongings besides a rucksack and her ACUs, and just began walking. Unbelievable. What was even more unbelievable was that a brigadier general had approved his cockeyed plan to enlist a civilian, albeit one with a doctorate and karate trophies. And working with civilians was always a recipe for disaster. Somehow, Old Man Monroe waved his hand, and this little plan had become a true and funded reality.